So, if God is real, why can't we see him?
Physically.
Well, that's the question. Why can't I see God right now?
So, are you asking me?
Yeah.
So God isn't necessarily physical substance. We do think that there were times that he came and was embodied in a physical substance. But we can see him work. We can see his actions. We definitely can perceive some of his workings in people. And I would say that if you see someone helping someone who's born alone or going out and rescuing people, you are seeing God. You're seeing the very nature of God played out.
But why other people who don't believe in God can do the same things? Why do you need God? Why can't we just say that's good? Why do we need to say it's God?
I would go to the moral argument and say that perhaps God is more necessary for morality as we view it than we would like to say, but that's a very long argument.
Okay. I'm going to complain. Some people ask me that. I tell them I think you can see God. I think it's possible to see God. I see God all the time. I think you can too. It's not something. I think if you see God all the time everywhere, then you wouldn't know when you're not seeing God. In other words, if every day is a rainy day, you don't know what a rainy day is. Every day is a sunny day, you don't know what a sunny day is. I always use the analogy of a heart cell. A heart cell looks around and goes, this is just, one sits there and goes, there's a higher purpose to all this. All this beating and moving, we're a part of a giant, this means something. And then the other heart cell goes, this is just order. The universe is an ordered place, and it just operates. You don't see anything but clock and mechanism. There's no higher purpose to it. It just is. And that's what I think about the argument between atheists and theists. So if you ask where is God, both of them are seeing God all the time. And, they just don't know that that's what they're seeing all the time. And I think the same thing's true of our relationship with God. But I think you can even see God in a very direct and personal way. I think that's possible and something that's available to anybody who wants it. So why does God love us, Kendall?
Big mystery to me, but I sure am glad he does.
When I ask that question, I say, God is love. So God does as God is. So this is just God's nature.
That's a better answer.
Let's see. So why did Jesus have to die for us, Caitlin?
I think it was a very long explanation we had a long time ago, and I don't think it's necessary to go that long. My brain's really...
It's okay.
I don't know. I really don't have an answer for that.
You don't?
Well, it's
You're going to need one on that one.
the intuitively obvious and the one that we hear all the time, to die for our sins. But
Okay.
I'm thinking, we once talked about how if God the Father sent his only Son to die on earth, in a human context, we consider that pretty cold-hearted, that you would send your child out to die for the sake of strangers. But at the same time, God rather knew that death was a possibility for Jesus.
Right.
But he needed him down there to redeem us and bring us back to him.
Perfect.
That's the only way I can describe it.
I think that's a perfect explanation. I think that the idea that, for me, I always talk about Jesus' death being a trick that God plays on the devil. The devil, and you have to put that within the context of the political spirit of the day and everything else. Jesus came to free us from oppression of the devil. Jesus, in order to do that, he had to destroy the system that the devil had put in place. He had to show the devil to be a lie. The Gospel of John is a courtroom drama. And that's what and Jesus proves the devil's system to be a lie. Jesus destroys the illusion that the devil created that he himself was God. And shows us what God really is, and that in a sinful world, the only way that Jesus was going to be able to do that was to accept at least the possibility of suffering and death. But I think what you said is fine. I think that was great. I think you came up with a good answer.
Yeah, that was good. It's just getting the words to convey what you want.
Yeah.
So.
Why did Jesus have to die for us? This world was dominated by sin and death, and the only way Jesus was going to be, God tricks the devil into taking that. God tricks death into taking himself into death's realm, and death can't hold him. That's from the book of Acts. Death could not hold him. Okay. What difference does it make to believe in God if God is just as kind to people who don't believe in Him?
To me, it's a powerful thing.
I'm asking Nick.
Go ahead.
I mean, the idea of him being just as kind, I'm not sure exactly where that comes from. Certainly he offers the same salvation to everybody. And the original question is, what good does it do to believe in God?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because God is that thing in which we ultimately find our satisfaction. He's the only one, I think, who can give us satisfaction. And so while he might offer us salvation, whether we're good or not, it is just generally going to be better for us to believe in him and act in him than it would be for us not to act in him.
Okay. That's good. I like it. Why Mary? Well, why was Mary the one chosen to carry Jesus?
That's a really good question. Because I don't know.
Probably doesn't go into much detail other than that she...
Well, I'm asking Kendall.
Well, we
Because
know
she's not going to have you there when she's sitting in the...
What we know about Mary is that she was young and God-fearing.
Okay.
And she needed to be a willing vessel for a very difficult situation. I mean, I can't imagine being told I'm going to have a baby without being married in that era. That would have been a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
So he needed somebody who was going to be faithful. And apparently she was betrothed to the right guy to be her faithful partner in it. And Christ needed to be raised in the temple when it was just part of the plan.
I think that all that's good. I would also...
I never really thought about it.
I would emphasize, for one thing, that she had to be descended from David.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So that's important.
Okay.
Additionally, he wanted to choose somebody who was humble and self-giving. A human that was going to reflect his own character. And so Mary's weak, she's humble, and that is the perfect vessel for what God was bringing into the world when you think about it.
I've sung the mag.
Yeah. Huh?
I've sung the mag.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Many times.
Right. There's a lot of humility and all that.
Right.
Here's a tough one. This is a hard one, Caitlin.
Joy.
The Bible has some strange stories in it. How come we don't see stuff like that anymore?
I talked about this a couple of weeks ago when it came to miracles, and it's sort of the same thing. We see what we call miracles in the Bible, and we could rate that as strange things. And yogis claim they do miracles every day, and their believers fully believe the strange things they do are miracles. And this is what I say, is that you have to believe it is a strange thing to see it in front of you. Strange things could be happening around us right now, and we do not recognize it as strange or miraculous. We recognize it as a force of nature or a freak accident. So I think you have to have an open mind, a very faithful mind, to see those things.
I think that's perfectly said. When I got asked that question, what I said is, I think they do. I mean, there's some pretty strange stuff that happens to me all the time. I've seen and heard some strange stuff I would put on par with anything that's happened in the Bible. I don't have, I think that there's, even if you get the most rational people, I wouldn't use these words, but there was on God and the Philosophers, which is a great book. If you've never read that book, you should. God and the Philosophers, you really need to read that book. But there's one guy and he says, look, even the most atheistic, rational people, he goes, get them in a room, get a couple drinks in them, get them talking about the right thing, and they'll tell you about stuff that happened to them that they know is strange and they know they can't easily explain. I do think that stuff still happens. So I think your answer is a great one. Okay. Why would God create the earth if he already had heaven? If God's living in heaven, which is perfect, why create the earth, which is imperfect?
Well, he didn't create the earth as imperfect.
Okay.
He created the earth with some sort of freedom.
Okay.
And I think heaven is a different type of realm than this one, if it is entirely its own separate realm and it's not somehow involved in ours. But there's very much the sense of God wanting to have a creation, wanting to have something that we'd be able to participate in. And if heaven is what we think it is, it would be very hard for us in the form God originally created us to tend to heaven like we could tend to the garden or like we could tend to the animals.
Fantastic. Beautifully said. So, Kendall, how do I know when you say God's called you to this? How do you know when it's God calling you? How do you know it's God talking to you at all? How do you know it's not the devil?
Good question, which is why it's really, really important to live in a good faith community, have people to bounce some things off of, keep reading your Bible, and once you start to get really, really familiar with the nature of God, it gets much easier to discern who's talking to you.
Good. Excellent. So what's the resurrection all about, Caitlin? I mean, what is the resurrection?
His resurrection?
Yeah, our resurrection, his resurrection, what's that all about?
I think of the resurrection more as a spiritual matter than an actual physical Jesus rising from the dead as a physical body, because he wasn't here that long after his resurrection. I just think it's your soul being cleansed.
Okay. I given the organization we're going with, I really would you can answer that way if that's what you want to answer. Me, if someone asks me how the resurrection works, and this is the truth too, because I waver back and forth on the bodily resurrection thing. I'm going to say, I don't know. I don't know how the resurrection works. I know Jesus came back. And I know I'm coming back too.
I won't go into details about bodily or spiritually. All I can say is it's a cleansing.
Yeah, that's good.
That's what I will say.
That's good. I like that. I'm not telling you not to say. Say what you want to say. I'm just warning you that if you get into issues of whether or not it's a bodily resurrection, he knows what I'm talking about. There's Christians who will go ballistic if you don't have a specific doctrine about what the resurrection is. When it comes to what the resurrection is, Joshua is saying the truth, which is, I don't know how the resurrection works. What I know is Jesus came back, and I'm coming back too.
Exactly.
Those are my...
I like that.
What?
Yep.
It might be physical matter, but it's physical
Incidentally,
matter that can
that's
teleport.
Paul's answer too.
Walk through water.
Right, exactly. That's Paul's answer too. Paul, be two places at once. You know, on the road to Emmaus at the same time he's appearing to Peter. It's all clearly a bodily resurrection, except right. Paul's answer is to sit there and say, when people are talking, well, is it a body or a soul? Paul goes, there's a soul body. Do you understand how completely senseless that term is? Soul body, really? Soul and body in Greek are opposing substances. They literally mean the opposite. They're the opposite of each other. So he's saying, his response is, in essence, I don't know how the resurrection works. What I know is that Jesus came back, and I'm coming back too.
Yeah, yep, see it. I'm perfectly comfortable with that.
Why did Jesus die for our sins? So there's another one like that. That's worth asking you too.
Worth asking me?
Yeah.
Well, I think the way that... Okay, I'm just going to say like I was answering them. The general gist of Jesus is that of Jesus' death, is that something that we do, that our evil somehow separates us from God, and that somehow there is a cost to God to come back in a relationship to us, and Jesus' death is him paying that cost. Now, whether it's because God was angry at us for our sins and had to take his wrath out on someone, or whether it was because there was just an inherent cost in our sin, and that in order to untangle us, he had to go through that, or whether it was him just trying to break the back of death so that he can bring us back from it. It can be one of those other things,
or
there's
all
a
of
long
them.
conversation.
Or all of them.
But the general gist is that God was paying whatever cost that was so that he could relate to us.
Fantastic. Very well said. Why did Judas betray Jesus?
Well, some people believe God made him. It was part of the plan. But Judas had a problem with the way Jesus was operating in the end, because he was looking for a warrior and a governor. And Jesus wasn't that.
Yeah.
And so Judas lost sight of Jesus as Messiah.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I'm asking you two here. The first one, just to give you an idea of what I actually have to deal with at Galloway. And am interesting how you would respond. You're not going to get this question. You could be unlucky enough to get this question. How did God create Santa?
I'm going to be historian very quickly. The original Saint Nicholas was a real saint in Eastern Europe.
That's exactly how I answered.
And I actually saw a documentary of Rick Steves' Europe, where Santa Claus is the traditional Saint Nicholas who goes and gives gifts in a more religious capacity than the secular. So however you define Santa Claus in the modern term, the original Saint Nicholas was a saint of God. God called on him. Whatever Saint Nicholas's original purpose was, God called on him, or God revealed himself to him, how it works, and he carried out his mission that God asked him to do. It's just been altered so much to where we have the man with the sled.
Good. So here's another one that I'm going to kind of change this question a little bit, and this is one I'm asking you specifically for a reason. If there's only one God and it's Jesus, all this stuff, what about all the other religions? What about all the other people who believe in all these other gods? What about why do I believe you over Hindus and Muslims and Jews and everybody else? Why don't you just there's tons of gods you don't believe in. Why don't I just go one God further and not believe in your God either?
This is really going to delve into a very personal opinion of mine that a lot of people would call me a heretic for. I'm going to be bluntly honest. I believe that all religions have in some capacity worshipped or tried to worship the one true God, but because of cultural differences, because of the way God intentionally or unintentionally revealed himself to mankind and the way they perceived his revelations, he has been altered in different capacities. Now, this is a personal thing, you could call it bias or whatever, is as a Christian, I believe the Jewish, Christian, Muslim version is more accurate. But in the end, I believe God revealed himself to humanity across time, but it all resulted in a different result. And I'm going to leave it a mystery for why you have all these different religions that worship God in different capacities.
I don't think there's nothing heretical in that at all. I mean, there isn't. There's no heresy there. I mean, my answer is to say, I don't go one. It's not like I'm an atheist about all other gods. It doesn't work that way. It's to me, the way I use an example is scientists used to disagree about what the electron was. They all believed in the electron, but they disagreed on what it was. And for me, I don't believe all religions are bound by a belief in the divine, and I have no doubt that on some level, to varying degrees, they touch God. But I believe that some religions are closer to the truth than others, and I think that Christianity is the one that gets that hits the mark the closest. And there's reasons why I believe that. How do you pick one religion over another? The consequences of religions are metaphysics, which is what do you believe about the universe? What do you believe about your place in the universe? Those religions say real things that you can then evaluate the truth of. You can't necessarily evaluate the historical stories they're based on. You can't go back in time and see if there was really a Muhammad. You can't go back in time and see if there really was a Jesus historically. You can't do that. What you can do is ask this question. For instance, Buddhism. Buddhism denies the self. It denies the self is real. To me, that's counter to everything we experience all the time. The self needs to be rethought sometimes, and Christianity says that, but the self is real. If there is no self, there's no human rights. There's no right and wrong. And all of those things seem like pretty basic beliefs to me. Things that you just can't give up very easily. That I can't. And so I look at a religion and say, okay, what does the religion say about the universe? When I look at Christianity, and Christianity says that there's me, that there's a higher purpose to life, that the world is so sinful that there has to be a cost to making things right, which is what you were talking about, that when somebody tells me that there is a God, and so life is ultimately good and life is ultimately redeemed, but the truth of that God is that God has to suffer to make things right. God has to suffer to make things right. To me, that's life. I say that's life. Now, a Muslim and a Hindu disagree on their analysis, but I can critique their understanding of life. And we may not be able to come to an agreement on a purely rational level, but I have reasons for rejecting their, and even the Jewish belief, even accepting Christianity over Judaism, or Christianity over Islam. For instance, with Islam, God is not vulnerable. He's not. There is no vulnerable God in Islam.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a God that's vulnerable, you lose so much, to me, of what makes me able to believe in God. I only believe in God because someone's convinced me that God is Jesus. If I don't believe God is like Jesus, that God is that, I can't believe in God at all, because there's too much evil in the world to believe in a God that's in control of everything.
Right.
Yeah.
A God that's arranging every moment of life.
Yeah, like I told you, my understanding Arabs, which I'm reading from Morocco, is they're very fatalistic. Like,
Right.
I don't want to use that word because it has a negative undertone, but they do believe God is in control of every little thing. And any bit of freedom that does exist in the free will that they do have in their lives will be overpowered by God's divine will.
Right. Exactly. And that is, and to some degree, the proof that that is not true in Christianity is the cross itself. The cross makes it impossible to believe that. The cross makes it impossible to believe in a God who, I mean, it's not impossible because there's Christians who've been fatalists. There's plenty of Christian fatalists.
Nice.
But for me, it's the cross that convinces me that God is real.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think everything you said was right. For me, I say, okay, first of all, I don't accept that that I'm an atheist about everybody else's God. That's not how I describe it. What I am is describing God differently. Now, we can then stop and say, whose description matches reality the best? I think mine does.
For me, myself, as an individual, and because because of like the traveling and the anthropology, I decide I believe in God, but I like to leave so much of it as this big mystery and rely
Sure.
on this faith and say, I cannot understand God's mind in the first place.
Sure.
And
No, everything you said was right. I was just giving you everything you said was fine.
Mm-hmm.
That why don't other people see God the way I do? I don't understand that. That's a great answer. What was I was gonna there was something that, tell me about the Trinity. I don't know. I have to accept it. I don't understand it. You know, there's plenty of stuff where you have to leave room for mystery.
Is this his question?
No.
All I